The County Land Office of Laramie, Wyoming Territory opened at 8 o'clock on a spring morning in 1879, and Dora Crane was at the window by 8 past the hour, with a brown paper folder tied with string and 3 years of perfectly correct paperwork inside it. The folder held everything: the land deed in her father's name, transferred to hers; the annual tax receipts, every one paid on time; the registration filings for 1876, 1877, and 1878, each accepted, each stamped, each in its proper place in the sequence. The filing for 1879 was in her hands now, complete and correct, and she laid it on the counter with the controlled precision of a woman who has been here before and knows what to expect. Clerk Reeves stood on the other side of the window. He looked at the papers without picking them up. He had a way of doing this that she had studied over 3 years, the particular detachment of a man making a decision he has already made. He slid one page back toward her with his fingertip. "Signature page is irregular," he said. "Filings voided. Come back when it's corrected." Dora picked up the page. She looked at it. The signature was hers, made correctly, in exactly the position required. She had checked it 4 times before she left the boarding house. "What exactly is the irregularity?" she said. But what she didn't know, standing at that window with her folder and her 3 years of correctly done everything, was that someone was already at the door. He had come to contest a survey discrepancy on his eastern fence line. He had read the Wyoming Territory land statutes before he entered this building, because that was how he did things, and he had just heard enough to have an opinion. What she had in that folder was enough. What she was missing was someone willing to say so out loud. But to understand why Dora Crane was standing at that county window with 3 years of paperwork and no one on her side, we have to go back to when it started. Spring 1879, Laramie. 3 years earlier, Dora's father had died and left her the boarding house, the building itself, the deed, the business he had built from nothing. It sat on a corner lot at the expanding main street of Laramie, which made it worth wanting, and certain men in town had been wanting it since before James Crane was cold in the ground. The pattern had been consistent. First year, a tax notice sent to her father's old address on the South Road, which she had caught only because she made a habit of checking. Second year, a survey challenge from the merchant to the east, claiming her building's wall encroached on his property line. The original survey had settled this question definitively in 1871, and she produced it, and the challenge was withdrawn. Third year, Clerk Reeves began raising the question of whether her signature on a single-party filing met the territorial requirement for women filing without a male cosigner. She had looked up the statute. It did not say what Reeves said it said. She had told him so. He had told her he interpreted it differently. She had corrected the filing per his stated objection. The following year, something else was wrong. The year after that, something else again. She knew this was not about signatures. She had not been able to prove it in a way that mattered, because the counter was his territory and his clerks and his stamp, and she was a woman alone with a folder. The boarding house had 4 paying boarders the morning of the window confrontation: a commercial traveler, a retired school teacher, a carpenter working a contract in town, and a young woman from the east who had come looking for work and stayed when she found it. Dora kept the accounts. Every entry was correct. Every dollar was accounted for. The building on the $600 lot produced enough to maintain itself, pay her own modest salary, and accumulate a very small reserve against the future. She had fought to keep it for 3 years. She was at the window fighting again. Reeves was explaining the signature irregularity, not clearly, because there was no clear explanation, but at length, when the man beside her spoke. He had arrived at the door while she was listening to Reeves, and had positioned himself at the counter without introduction. He picked up the voided document from the counter. "Which statute?" he said to Reeves, not to her. His voice was level and specific, and had the quality of a man who is asking a question he already knows the answer to. "The signature requirement for a single-party land filing under territorial code?" Reeves looked at him. Reeves looked at Dora. Something shifted behind his eyes. She looked sideways at the man beside her. He was her height, maybe an inch over it, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors and the steady hands of someone who worked precisely. He had a coat on and a slight accent she couldn't place, and he was holding her voided filing with the care of a man who intends to use it. "I have the right statute in my folder," she said quietly. "Already found it." "I know," he said. "I'm making him look at it." He asked Reeves, specifically, which section he was citing. Reeves cited a section. The man beside her said the section did not say what Reeves had represented it to say, and then he produced from his own coat pocket a copy of the Wyoming Territory Land Code. He carried it when he came to the county building and opened it to the relevant page and read aloud. The petitioner on the bench against the wall had stopped shuffling his papers. Through the window she could see two people on the boardwalk who had slowed their walking. Reeves objected. The man cited the specific language of the statute again, and did not raise his voice and did not look away from Reeves. He went through the sequence of her filing requirements one by one, citing the applicable statute for each one, and named at each step the exact regulation Reeves had applied and the exact language in it that Reeves had misread. By the time they left the building, the filing had been accepted under advisement, and Reeves was writing a letter to his superior that he would clearly have preferred not to write. On the boardwalk, in the hard blue light of a Wyoming spring morning, they stood. She had her folder under her arm. He had his copy of the land code. She thanked him. He said, "The statute was clear. Reeves knows it." She said, "I know it too." "I know," he said. He looked at the street. "He'll find something else next year." "He has for 3 years," she said. He turned and looked at her directly. He had the kind of eyes that were doing two things at once, assessing and simply seeing. "Elias Brand," he said. "I run cattle east of town." "Dora Crane," she said. "I run the boarding house 2 streets over." "I know," he said. "It's the building on the corner lot." She looked at him. "You know about the lot." "I know about the men who want the lot," he said. "Reeves is convenient to their purposes. It isn't hard to see the pattern from the outside." She had been inside the pattern for 3 years and had never once heard anyone else name it. "What are you going to do about the survey?" she said. She was not sure why she asked, except that she was in the habit of staying on practical ground. "Fight it," he said. "Same as you." He said it with the simple certainty of a man who has not considered any other option. 3 weeks passed. The boarding house continued. The 4 boarders paid their rent on schedule. Dora kept the accounts. She heard nothing from the county office. Agnes Witt, who ran the dry goods store 2 doors from the county building, had positioned herself over the years as the most reliably informed person in Laramie on matters of a bureaucratic or financial nature. She had opinions about all of them. She delivered these opinions while doing something else entirely, which was how she had learned made them go down easiest. She was counting bolts of calico when she said it. "Reeves got a formal inquiry from the territorial office," she said, "about his filing procedures." Dora looked up from the spool of thread she was examining. Agnes counted another bolt. "Word is, it originated from a cattleman named Brand." Dora said nothing. She set the spool on the counter. 300 acres east of town, Agnes said. Survey dispute on the eastern parcel. Thorough man. Dora paid for the thread. She walked back to the boarding house and sat at the kitchen table with the account book and the document folder and looked at the numbers. The numbers were fine. They had always been fine. The numbers had never been the problem. She wrote Elias Brand a note. Plain and direct. The way she wrote most things, asking if he could advise her on the process for filing a formal property protection notation, which was a legal mechanism she had found in the territorial code and had not been able to access alone. He arrived at the boarding house 3 days later, in the evening, and she showed him to the kitchen table and set the document folder in front of him. He went through it the way she imagined he went through most things, completely and in order, with the specific attention of a man who intends to understand everything before he speaks. He turned each page carefully. He made notes on a small pad in his coat pocket. Halfway through the second year of filings, he set a document down. This has been deliberate, he said, not with particular inflection, simply naming a thing. Yes, she said, since the beginning, since the first year. He looked at her. She looked at him. You've known for 3 years, he said. Since year 1, she said. I've been managing it alone because there was no one else. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the folder. Who's behind Reeves? He said. She told him. The hotel developer who wanted the corner for an expansion. The merchant on the adjacent block who wanted the alley access the boarding house blocked. 2 men, different motives, both served by the same clerk and the same campaign of procedural attrition. Elias closed the folder. He set his hands on it. I'll file the protective notation in the morning, he said. With your documentation and mine combined, they'll need a court order to come near this property again. The document folder on the table between them. Her father's deed visible at the corner of it, the fold lines worn soft from years of handling. She had been fighting for 3 years. She had never once had someone sit at this table and say, I'll handle it. Her chest did something unexpected. Not relief, not exactly. The particular release of a weight you have been carrying so long, you forgot the carrying of it. You don't have to, she said. I know, he said. I'm going to anyway. He filed the notation in the morning, with her documentation and his survey records, and a letter citing 3 different territorial statutes. The filing went through. Clerk Reeves processed it with the expression of a man doing something he would rather not, but cannot find a procedural way to avoid. Outside afterward, on the boardwalk, she said, You came prepared. I always come prepared to the county building, he said. She thought about the land code in his coat pocket. How long have you been carrying that statute book? 4 years, he said. Since I had my first survey dispute and discovered that Reeves has flexible ideas about what the law requires. She said, You've been fighting him too. On my own behalf, he said. Not as interestingly as you. The notation held. It held through the spring and into summer. The developer's letter arrived in June, short, correctly written, offering to purchase the boarding house lot at a figure that Dora recognized as an acknowledgement that the procedural path was closed. He was offering below the assessed value of the lot, and the assessed value was itself below market. She took the letter to Elias Brand, not because she needed him to handle it, because she wanted to show him what his help had made possible. He read it. He said it was a low offer for a well-located property on Laramie's Main Street. She said she was not selling. He said, Good. There was a pause in the kitchen. The boarding house quiet around them, the boarders gone to their rooms, the evening settling in, the light through the window going gold, the document folder on the shelf where she had moved it, the account book on the counter, every entry still correct. He said he would like to see the boarding house books. He said it with the particular care of a man who means something different from what the sentence says. She looked at him, her breath caught in a way she had not expected. She understood what he meant. "They're in good order," she said. "I expect they are," he said. 3 years of them, she said. "Every entry. I'd like to see them," he said. "All 3 years." She set the account book on the table between them. He opened it. She sat across from him and watched him read it, with the complete attention she had seen him give the document folder, the statute book, the county filings. He read every entry. He turned each page. He said nothing until he reached the current month. "You've been running this correctly," he said. "Yes," she said. "With no margin for error." "There wasn't any margin," she said. "So I didn't use one." He looked at the last entry. He looked at her. "That's done now," he said. She held very still. "The notation protects the property," he said. "The developer isn't coming back. You have margin now." She looked at the account book. The close, careful entries. 3 years of running on exactly nothing extra, of treating every dollar as potentially the last one, of managing alone because there was no one else. "I'm not sure I know how to use margin," she said. He said, "I expect you'll figure it out." She looked up at him. He was looking at the account book with the neutral expression he used when he was being more direct than his words. She said, "Are you going to come back, Elias Brand?" He looked at her. "Yes," he said, "as often as is appropriate." "Define appropriate," she said. "More often than you'll expect," he said. "Less often than I'd like." The developer's letter went into the folder beside her father's deed. Agnes Witt heard the filing had been accepted without comment that fall, and said she had expected nothing less. The boarding house continued. The 4 boarders became 5. The accounts remained in good order. Elias Brand became a fixture at the boarding house supper table, in the way of a man who finds reasons to be somewhere and stops pretending he needs a reason. He came Tuesday evenings and Thursday evenings and occasionally a Sunday. And the other boarders treated him with the matter-of-fact ease of people who have decided that something is simply how things are. By the first frost of the following year, the account book had a different quality to it. Not different numbers, not different entries, different weight. It was no longer a last defense. It was a record. A careful, accurate, complete record of how a woman had run a building for 4 years with no margin and absolute precision, and had kept it entirely hers. She closed it and set it on the shelf. She did not throw it out. Accuracy was accuracy, regardless of the circumstances that produced it. The document folder sat on the parlor shelf with both their names on the current filing. And her father's deed was framed on the wall beside the window where the morning light came in. And the boarding house was hers in every way that had ever mattered, and now in every way that was recorded in county files as well. Agnes Witt came in one morning to tell her that Reeves had been moved to a different posting in a smaller county. She said it in the particular tone of someone delivering satisfying information. Dora said, "Thank you for telling me." Agnes said, "I thought you'd like to know." Dora poured her a coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table and did not say anything further about Clerk Reeves, who was not worth further conversation. Some things are just in the end, not dramatic, not celebrated in the street. Simply corrected, filed, and done. What she had in that folder had always been enough. What she had needed was someone willing to say so out loud and mean it loud enough for the county building to hear. The land deed hung on the wall. It had always belonged there. Now it knew it. If you have ever been told your perfectly correct paperwork is irregular by someone who found it convenient, this one is for you. Stay close. There are more stories ahead. There is a specific loneliness that comes from being right and having no one to confirm it. Dora had lived in it for 3 years, knowing the statute said what she said it said, knowing the filings were correct, knowing the campaign against her property was organized and deliberate, and having no one on her side of the counter to name these things aloud. She had not complained about this. There was no one to complain to. She had simply managed it, season by season, with the methodical thoroughness of a woman who understands that precision is the only tool she has that the other side cannot take away. What she had not anticipated was what it would feel like to have someone sit at her kitchen table and go through 3 years of that management and name each obstacle and what the correct response would have been. Not to make her feel she had failed, but because he was thorough. The same thoroughness he brought to everything else. He named each one precisely. First year, the tax notice, addressable by filing for a formal correction of address record, which would have created a paper trail against future misdirection. Second year, the survey challenge, correctly handled, except that she should have filed a counter record at the county office establishing the 1871 survey as the definitive record, which would have made future challenges harder. Third year and onward, the signature objections, the statute was clear and she had been right to push back, but the correct procedure was a formal written objection for the county file, not a verbal one at the counter. She listened to all of it. "You've been doing the right things in the right order," he said. "The wrong venue. Verbal at a window leaves no record. Written in the file, with copies retained, creates a history of the obstruction." "I didn't know about the formal written objection," she said. "Most people don't." He said, "That's convenient for Reeves." She thought about 3 years of standing at the window and saying the right things to a man who had no reason to write them down. 3 years of doing everything correctly and having nothing to show for it but a stamp she'd had to fight for. "Show me how to file it," she said. He showed her. They sat at the kitchen table with the territorial code and the county regulations, and he walked her through the formal objection process with the same patience and specificity he had used at the county window, and she took notes. Because she always took notes, and at the end she had a complete procedural understanding of every tool available to a property owner fighting this kind of attrition. "You'll know it now," he said. "I won't need it now," she said. "The notation protects the property. The notation protects it for 5 years," he said. "After that it needs renewal. And Reeves won't always be Reeves. Whoever comes after him might be different, might not be." She looked at him. "You're teaching me," she said, "in case you're not here." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I intend to be here, but I think you should know the law regardless." She sat with that for a moment, the particular honesty of it. "All right," she said. They went through the rest of the regulations. The protective notation had a clarifying effect on her situation. She had been managing the boarding house in a state of constant low-level vigilance, always checking, always anticipating the next obstacle, always treating the success of the current month as provisional. The notation did not change the building or the business or the accounts. It changed the quality of her attention. She could look at the account book without reading it as a last defense. She found she had more time for the boarding house itself. She had always run it well. The rooms were clean. The meals were good. The accounts were exact. But she had been running it from inside a siege, which is different from running it freely. She made the small improvements she had been deferring. She replaced the kitchen curtains, which had been serviceable but shabby, with good cotton ones from Agnes's Dry Goods. She had the front steps repaired, which had been on the list for a year. She planted a kitchen garden along the south wall, which she had been meaning to do since the first spring, and had not found the mental space for. Elias came on a Thursday evening and found her in the garden with her hands in the soil and looked at it with the approving expression of a man who recognizes good decision-making. "You finally put the garden in," he said. She looked up. "You knew I was going to?" "You mentioned it in April," he said, "as something you hadn't had time for." She had mentioned it, briefly, in the course of one of their Thursday conversations. She had not realized he was filing it. "You remember that," she said. "I remember what you tell me," he said, in the way of a man stating a simple fact. She looked at him for a moment. He was looking at the garden with the neutral attention that was, she had learned, his default expression for things he was actually thinking about. She went back to the soil. He went inside and started supper, which was something he had taken to doing on Thursday evenings, and which she had stopped commenting on, because commenting on it would have required them to discuss what it meant, and she found she was not in a hurry to define it. The boarding house smelled like rosemary that summer, from the garden, and the accounts showed the first real surplus in 3 years. Not large, enough to matter. She set a small amount aside each month. She had not had a reserve in 3 years. Having one was a different kind of quiet. Agnes Witt said one morning, over the counter, that she had heard Elias Brand had filed a counter record at the county office, establishing the 1871 survey as the definitive record for his eastern parcel, and that the survey dispute was resolved, and that Reeves had processed the resolution with the same put-upon expression he had been wearing all year. Dora said, "Good." Agnes looked at her with the knowing expression that was her particular gift. "He comes Thursday," Agnes said. It was not a question. "And Tuesday," Dora said. "Recently Friday as well." Agnes nodded. She looked satisfied. Dora bought her thread and went back to the boarding house, which was solid in hers, and had good curtains now, and a kitchen garden, and 4 reliable boarders, and a man who came 3 evenings a week and remembered what she mentioned in April. The document folder on the parlor shelf had both their names on the current filing. The deed was on the wall. The accounts were in good order. She opened the boarding house ledger one more time that evening, at the kitchen table, and read every entry from the beginning. 3 years of running alone on nothing extra, managing the siege, keeping everything in its right place. It was a complete and accurate record of a woman who had done the right things in the right order in the wrong venue. She closed the ledger. She set it on the shelf beside the folder. Both of them could stay there now. They were history, not necessity. The boarding house was still running. Still correct, still hers. The difference was that now it was running on margin. And the margin was real, and she had not had to fight anyone for it. She went to the kitchen and started the supper. She could hear Elias on the porch. He had arrived, apparently, and had found a board on the step that was soft and was assessing it. She heard the particular sound of someone testing a board and finding it wanting. "That step needs replacing," he said through the screen. "I know," she said. "I've had it on the list. I can do it Saturday," he said. She stood at the stove for a moment. "All right," she said. He came in and washed his hands at the basin, and she heard the sound of him moving in the boarding house kitchen. Familiar now. The particular way he occupied a space. And she thought about the window at the county building, and the statute he had cited, and the cold morning light on the boardwalk, and Elias Brand with a land coat in his coat pocket, and the flat certainty of a man who finds procedural bullying personally offensive. She had been standing at that window for 3 years. He had stepped up beside her. That was the thing. Not the notation, or the statute, or the territorial inquiry. Simply that. Someone stepping up beside her, not in front of her, not explaining what needed to be done, beside her, ready to say what she already knew in a voice that made Reeves have to hear it. She was not alone at the window anymore. She served supper. He said the step would be fixed Saturday, and then the subject was done, and they ate with the ease of people who have been feeding each other honestly for long enough that the meals are simply meals. The boarding house stood. The deed was on the wall. The garden was in. That was enough, and it was all hers, and it was just beginning.